I'd like you to consider in a normal day how many times you need to work as part of a group, or you are responsible for reporting to someone as part of a team. So we often in our program will tell students that after they graduate, group work is just called work. And Chapter 10 introduces managing productive groups as another tried and true teaching method we can use in college teaching. By the end of this lecture, you will be able to summarize the benefits and challenges or caveats of group work in college classrooms. You will describe strategies for helping ad hoc groups work effectively. These are groups that you may put together just for a class session. And then you will suggest approaches for managing a semester-long group project. So I'd like you to reflect on your own group work experience in college. What comes to mind when you hear you'll be working in groups during a course? Are you excited about that? Are you hesitant? Do you roll your eyes, let out an audible sigh? These are the reactions I have seen from students, and maybe you have too. Maybe you're guilty of them as well. So when you reflect on what is it that you like or not like about working in groups, I hope you can recognize that as a teacher, there are things you can do to help students through this process. I often think of this e-card, and maybe you've heard this before when we think about group projects. So when I die, I want the people I did group projects with to lower me into my grave so they can let me down one last time. So I recognize that group work can be challenging and stressful for students, but it is a very effective teaching method, and it goes by many names. So these are all terms that you could use to look up additional resources and guidance for using group-based learning in your classroom. So while I'll be talking about groups or teams, recognize that many will call them cooperative or collaborative, peer instruction, peer tutoring, team-based learning, some variety of these terms. And studies have found that working in groups really is an effective way to learn. And for some students, it's more effective than individual learning, that having peers, of having others teaching them the material or learning through observation and additional explanation really helps them reach their learning outcomes. But facilitating a group is different than delivering a lecture. And it's different than guiding discussion, because you really have to relinquish control and being the center of the classroom and move that into the groups and facilitate the way they are approaching whatever the activity or the assignment is. And studies have found positive effects of group learning. So all of these areas are benefited by integrating group or team-based learning, cooperative learning, peer learning, whatever you call it. It does have a wide range of benefits for students. But if you've been a part of these or helped guide students through this, you know there are some drawbacks or caveats. Some groups may not always enhance learning. They may be unproductive. They really require good oversight and organization and monitoring to make sure that students are being held accountable, that they're contributing to the bigger mission, that they're not being distracting or disrespectful to their teammates, their fellow group members. There's also a lot of recognition that we need to have as teachers that students may not have the maturity and understanding on how to facilitate productive groups and teams. They really look to the teacher to step in to manage conflict or to give that extra encouragement. They really don't want to be mean to each other, and that can create some unique scenarios that have to be addressed. So the students really do expect you as the instructor to intervene when there's poor group dynamics and behavior. Really, they're not entering college prepared to take on the the responsibility of carrying out the whole group-based assignment on their own. So they need some modeling and some reassurance and instruction in how to do so. So when you consider, putting a group-based learning assignment into a course, you really need to reflect and consider what you can do to help students work better in groups. We use groups a lot in our agricultural communications program, and we've spent a lot of time debating on, how many on a team, how much of the course should be dedicated to group work, how do they select their teams, how do they give feedback on each other, and so on. So there's a lot of things that you can be doing as an instructor to help support them. So I mentioned a couple things. The book goes into more detail about the need to help groups work effectively on how they communicate, how they divide labor. We actually will have a classroom discussion about writing a contract. What are the things that you want your team members to do? What are the things that they should keep in mind about you? Something as simple as some of our students want to work in a coffee shop and others say, well, that's too loud. We need to be in the library. Well, they need to have those conversations. They need to compare meeting times with their class schedule and their work commitments. They also need to discuss what they're going to do if people don't follow through and do their share of the work. So these aren't things that they may think about doing on day one, but as the teacher, if you're going to use groups in the class, you need to provide some guidance and reassurance to students to help these be effective. So one of the ways that you can practice this and help your students practice this is by beginning with in-class and ad hoc groups. So this is where you might put people together in a class and just have them complete something within that session's time frame. So you give them a specific structured task with an end product that has to be turned in. It usually needs to be more challenging than what you would have them do on their own because they can compare notes, they can lean on each other's wisdom and experience to get it done. My twin sister used to teach high school, and she would tell me you need to engage the mind before you engage the body. So basically, don't put people into groups, having them move around the room before you explain what they're going to do. Because once they're in their groups, it's usually a bit, hopefully, loud and chaotic. They're talking, they're getting involved. So I always like to give clear instructions verbally and then on the slide before they move into their groups. I give them a time limit and I'll check in on that. I'll say, okay, who needs 5 more minutes? And then we can do that. But I want to keep them focused and going. And it never fails that some groups will finish before others. And I just acknowledge, I recognize you're done. Can you spend a little bit of time doing this? Here in a moment, I'm going to have your group go first. Or whatever it is to help them feel engaged and stay on task. So there's some other, like walking around and monitoring progress, I think is really important. And if I notice that someone isn't engaging with their group, they're leaning back, they're on their phone, I might walk over and say, hey, do you mind put away your phone? I wonder what contribution you've made to the group, and just to let them know I see them. I also will mix up the group composition. Sometimes if I want it to be really fast, we're just going to do a quick activity. I'll say, at your table or turn around. Other times I'll rearrange them and I'll say, okay, you need to get up and move. And so I just want to keep, it just really depends on how much time I have for the activity in that class session. So I wanted to show you a couple slides that I use in my class when I'm doing this. So this is just a simple instruction slide that says, here in a moment you're going to be in groups. Okay, I'm going to be working in a group. And then what is my expectation? What are the, what's allowed? how are they going to report out? And again, in this case, I wanted them to use resources. And again, for me, that helps encourage them to be taking notes, to have their books in class, and so on. Another activity I do, we walk through an ethical issue together in class before they break out into their groups. But this one I wanted to show you because I have them decide on roles in the group. I find if I can do this for some of the group work and ask them, and I'll move around the room and say, okay, who's going to be your speaker? Who's writing the notes? Who's your leader? It doesn't make them waffle about it. They're like, okay, I'll do it, you do this, and they get right to work when I can have them choose their role. The book has a number of in-class group activities that you can use for these ad hoc sessions. So I'll let you look through that on your own time and to see if there's some strategies here that could work for the class you want to teach or perhaps you are teaching. What I want to spend a little more time on is the semester-long groups. It's easy for me to put together a group in a class and have them work through an activity and turn something in. It's another thing to manage a group over the semester. There's a lot of things that I have to keep in mind. You can see that bulleted list here and explained in the book on pages 130 through 133. There's a lot of elements that have to be involved. And in our senior level AgCom course, we teach a block, and that means that students are in the same 4 classes together the whole semester, and we use groups a lot in that. So we might be managing 10 or 11 different groups of 4 to 5 students. So we've learned a thing or two over time about what will help them be successful. So what I want you to do is imagine you're teaching a semester long, you're teaching a course that is going to incorporate a semester long group project. So tell me, what would that project be? And perhaps this is for the course you're going to develop during the semester as the assignment, or it could be something different. But tell me, what's the project and what are 3 potential learning outcomes? So once you have that, then I want you to think about what are those factors you need to keep in mind. So how many on a team? Are they going to get to pick their own teams? Are you going to put them into their groups? Are you going to require them to have check-ins, or are they going to fill out feedback forms? So on and so forth. So what are those decisions you need to make? So refer to the advice on these pages, and then other advice that you might find online or know from your own experience to tell me a little bit more about this project and how you would go about supporting it. So in review, we recognize group work can offer many benefits, but it does have some challenges or caveats. We need to evaluate and adapt our group strategies to make sure they're addressing the teaching goals and classroom context. Something as simple as, are you going to give them time in class to meet in their groups? That's something they want to know. This effective group management requires clear expectations, defined roles, and you're going to have to provide support as the instructor. Practice doing this with ad hoc groups so that way you can build up to semester-long groups that need more scaffolding, accountability measures, and ongoing feedback. So this productive group work really depends on how much thought and care you've put into designing it and monitoring it, and not just assigning students to groups randomly and then stepping out of the situation.